Hey, good afternoon. My name is Greg Johnson with Fluid Tech International. I'm here with Kathy Nelson. Kathy will be speaking to us today about normalizing women in science, technology, engineering, and math. Happy to have her. And Kathy, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. So what I want to talk to you all about today is normalizing women in STEM and the importance of this. I have been a utility engineer for 29 years, so a little bit over 29 years, which is kind of hard to say because it makes me feel very old. And about 2.5 years ago, I started a podcast, which I'm going to give a blatant plug to. It's called Ordinarily Extraordinary: Conversations with Women in STEM. I started that about 2.5 years ago, actually during COVID, and I had some time on my hands, as I think we all did, and started just having a lot of conversations with women and recording them. I've now talked to 91 women through my podcast, and there's been something that has come up as kind of a recurring theme lately that has really been on my mind, and that is the lack of representation of women in STEM in media. And so that's a lot of what I want to talk to you all about today. I have a dream that someday I will not have a podcast about women in STEM. I have a dream that someday I will not be considered a female engineer. I hope that someday I will just be able to be an engineer and that I will be able to be somebody who works in a STEM field. 35 or so years ago, I was over at my, at the time boyfriend, now husband's parents' house, and my boyfriend at the time, his dad came home from the doctor and made a comment about how he had seen a lady doctor. And at that time, I mean, you guys think this is like 1989, 1990, that was kind of unusual, not super unusual, but kind of unusual. There were only about 17% of physicians that were women about that time. And if you think to your experiences now, probably more often than not, you're probably seeing a woman doctor, and it's not that out of the ordinary. That's what I hope all of our STEM fields will get to at some point. As of 2020, 50.5% of medical school graduates were women. Now, I grew up with a dad who was a professor of engineering technology. He raised 3 girls. I didn't have any brothers, and he really wanted one of his kids to be an engineer. What I didn't realize at the time was that his encouragement and his desire for this, I was the youngest of the 3 girls, put me on a trajectory of never thinking that I couldn't be an engineer or that there was anything different or weird about me being a girl and going into engineering. That was almost 35 years ago. But that provided a framework for me that I built my career around, and I didn't question or even think that I was different until I started working in the utility industry and found myself to be the only woman engineer, at least in the field. There was a planner engineer, but she was in the office. So what I'm going to talk to you about today in the media representation, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert in this area. I'm not. I'm an engineer, as I talked about. But I do have a lot of conversations with women in different STEM fields, and the lack of representation of women in STEM fields in the media is something that I think can move the needle on getting women to go into STEM fields. For those that you don't know, in the engineering field, as an example, only about 17% of engineers are women, and that's pretty low. As an example, for myself, and I graduated from college about 30 years ago, there were 4 women in my electrical engineering graduating class of 75, which is not anywhere near 17%. So I want to chat today about that importance. And while I talked about I'm not an expert in this field, I have found resources and people who are. So a lot of what my information is going to come from today, it comes from the Gina Davis Institute. And many of you may have heard of Gina Davis. She's an actress. This is not her, by the way. I have some pictures of some women in film that are portraying women in STEM characters. And the Gina Davis Institute has been around for about 30 years. And it was put together by Gina Davis to do research around the underrepresentation of women in media and even more so in STEM fields. The phrase, "you can't be what you can't see," is something that probably most of you have heard. And it's really something that I think is very, very true. And so Gina Davis, as I talked about, she's an actress. She has won Oscar and Golden Globe awards. She is also a world-class athlete. At one time, she was a U.S. 13th ranked archer. Fun fact that I didn't know before this. She's a member of the Genius Society Mensa and is now recognized for her tireless advocacy of women and girls nearly as much as she is for her acting accomplishments. As I talked about, she's the founder and chair of the nonprofit Gina Davis Institute on Gender in Media, which engages film and television creators to dramatically increase the percentage of female characters and reduce gender stereotyping in media. She holds honorary degrees from Boston University, Bates College, and New England College. So women in television are still quite underrepresented. And this is in general, this is not talking about women in STEM yet. Male leads vastly outnumber female leads by 71% to 28%. This means that men's stories are featured twice as often as women's stories. And female leads are the least represented in action. I think we can all relate to that when we see action movies, adventure, and comedy genres. However, they're equitably represented in horror. I thought that was kind of interesting at about 56%, and romance films. This has been increasing, though. The number of leads of women has been going up from 23% in 2007 to about 30% in 2017. And family films with female leads caught up with and surpassed films with male leads in the past decade. A decade ago, family films with male leads earned significantly more revenue than films with female leads, but that has since reversed, and now family films that have female leads are outperforming family films with male leads, which is great. But we need more movies, more TV shows, and more books with women in STEM fields as positive portrayals. Negative media messages of STEM characters send profoundly negative messages that STEM professions are for white men. And this narrow representation has not improved. Of all STEM characters, men outnumber women nearly 2 to 1. And while we're going to be focusing in this discussion, I mean, a lot of what I'm talking about is in film and TV shows. This goes to books too. And I was a great lover of books when I was growing up, and books are also important. We'll talk about that as well in a little bit. The media has the power to educate, to shape people's thoughts. It has an incredible power when you see someone like you on the screen. And I'm going to extrapolate on that a little bit. Also, when it's someone that like you, or someone that you want to be. The Gina Davis Institute, as I talked about, was founded in 2004. And it was founded to help understand and create gender balance, foster inclusion, and reduce negative stereotyping in family entertainment. The stories that we choose to tell in entertainment send a specific message about who matters in our culture. In order to bring about a global culture change, it is especially important that children see diverse, intersectional representation of characters in media to reflect the population of the world, which is half female and very diverse, and avoid unwittingly instilling unconscious bias in them. So what's the solution? As we talked about, media has the power to educate, to shape people's thoughts. And from the beginning, the data from the Gina Davis Institute is the key to mitigating unconscious bias in the creation of entertainment media. They use data-driven research, education, and advocacy to empower and inspire content creators to reimagine the media landscape to reflect the world we live in. The Gina Davis Institute has sponsored the largest amount of research ever done on children's entertainment media, covering over a 30-year span. So this is Gina Davis, and What she says is if women and girls don't see themselves on screen as STEM professionals, they're less likely to pursue those career paths. And as I was doing some research for this presentation, I was also, I had a podcast interview that came out last week. And in my conversation, I was with a woman from a rural town in Western Kentucky. And she talked about how in her town, there really weren't any STEM professionals, not even just not women, but there weren't any. The only STEM professionals were in the medical fields. And she talked about the importance of she saw Jurassic Park and saw a female paleontologist in Jurassic Park. And that sparked her interest, and she wanted to be a paleontologist. I will also say she ended up not being a paleontologist. She ended up being a civil engineer. But it sparked a sense of what could be, what is possible, in a sense, and a love of science that ended up providing her background and her foundation for going into civil engineering. So those media portrayals are really, really important, and there really just aren't enough of them, and not enough positive ones either. So why is this important? I mean, I talked about how about 17% of engineers are women, and it's really about building the pipeline. And when you think about a pipeline within STEM and women in STEM, it's a very leaky pipeline. Girls and women leave STEM at every key joint, and the joints of this metaphor represent childhood, high school, college, and as STEM professionals. So in childhood, girls and boys engage in STEM-related activities at a similar rate. They might engage in different types of STEM activities, but girls receive less encouragement from adults. Interest in STEM careers remain stable for boys throughout high school, but for girls, it starts at a much lower level because they've already been, the first pipeline has already made things challenging, and it declines throughout high school. And so there's another leak in the pipeline. Now, high school girls and college women outperform boys and men in math classes, but college women are significantly less likely than men to choose STEM majors, and they remain underrepresented in the number of bachelor's degrees earned in STEM. In the US, there's about 6.7 million men that have a degree in STEM compared to 2.5 million women that have degrees in STEM. And then as we move into our careers, there are fewer women with STEM degrees pursuing careers in STEM than men. Of women with STEM degrees, only 26% of them work in a STEM occupation compared to 40% of men working in a STEM occupation. So you see how like this continuous loss of women at different phases really creates a very, I'm going to say, very small pipeline of women in STEM. And it can sometimes be a lonely place for us that work in STEM fields. So what can we do to change this trajectory? I talk a lot about, I mean, there's a lot of different things that can be done and a lot of really important things, but I'm really focusing on within media. And I think, you know, within media and what our children are growing up with and what parents and teachers are saying that, you know, that also help inform them as to what opportunities there are, we need to demand that women and girls of all backgrounds are represented across media. We need to put our money into media that feature women in STEM. We need to expose our children to media that is inclusive, in particular of areas that are dominated by one group or have historically been dominated by one group. In addition to providing STEM role models, we need to also counteract negative bias in media. So what I want to talk about here, I live in a very, I don't know if any of you can see my background, but I live in a very rural area of Minnesota. And I was out shopping with my adult daughter. She was home for the summer, and we were at a little boutique in my town that is a clothing boutique, and then it also has like some stuffed animals and some things for babies. And there were some soft cloth books in this boutique. And these cloth books were talking about how the different careers that you can have, which I'm now thinking like, why are there baby books talking about careers anyway? But that's a whole other story. There was a pink book covered book and there was a blue covered book, which again, a whole nother story. Why we have, colors of gender bias colors is a whole other issue. But they had the same picture on the front, and they both showed, about 4 people, and they had a scientist on both. And I believe the scientist was a woman. And this was on the cover of the book. So I was like, great, we're making progress. Like, I was feeling really good about this. And then I opened up the books. Inside the pink book, which I'm assuming was made for the girls, you can be a teacher. You can be a mother. Great things to be. Don't want to, put very, very important roles. In the boys' book, you can be a fireman. You can be a chemist. And this is starting at infancy. So not only are we trying to, create positive images and positive media messages, but it starts so very young that we have to overcome those biases that are going to be formed in our kids before they're even watching TV. One of the things that I've been thinking about as I started doing some research into this and, looking at how many movies have women in STEM, how many books have women in STEM, I couldn't find any kind of a database about this. So if you go to, I just did some Google searches looking for books on women in STEM, fiction books with women in STEM characters. And there would be blog postings and articles about it, but there's not like one repository or a good repository of this. So I kind of have in my head, like I talked about, I do this podcast and I have a website for this podcast. Maybe that's something that I can start. Maybe that's something that I can contribute. I'm not sure. Seems like a lot of work if you got to find all those places to be able to get that data from, and it's challenging. So I wanted to move a little bit from visual media to written media, talking about the importance of books and fictional characters. And there's a lot of, I don't say a lot, there are books that are being written that are for girls in STEM. There are books that are written about women in STEM fields, a lot of great information going out there. One of the things that I think is important, and this is just my thought, is having side characters also that are women. So it's not necessarily a whole book or a whole movie about a woman in STEM, but just having those characters that this is their job, right? Like, that's not the focus point of the story, but a woman scientist, a woman engineer, a woman technician, a woman plumber, a woman electrician, this is like a side character or a side job, just not really a part of the main story. I think back to, and I'm going to go back to visual media for a minute. I think back to the TV series Friends, because that's what I grew up with when I was in college in the early 20s. And I think too, there's 3 women and 3 men in that series. The 3 women had fairly traditional female jobs. There was Phoebe, she was a masseuse. Monica, she was a chef, which is actually not necessarily like a female dominated role, and then there was Rachel, who was, kind of trying to figure out what she was and worked in retail. And then for the 3 men, you have Chandler, who worked in IT, and you have Ross, who was a paleontologist, and then you have Joey, who was an actor. But couldn't one of those women have been a chemist? Or, it's really just making those changes so that it's not something that we have to think about. It's not something we have to search out. It's not something that is in your face. It's just a normal part of who we are. And that's really what I hope that we can get to, is that that women in STEM, women in engineering, women scientists, women in trades even, we're just a normal part of society, that we're not called women in STEM. We're not called female engineers. I just want to be an engineer. So I know this wasn't a very long presentation, and I hope we have some time for discussion, but I did want to provide some resources. As I talked about, the Gina Davis Institute has a wealth of knowledge. Honestly, like, I had no idea how much information there was there, but there's so much information about women in media and women in STEM. in media. And then I have a couple of short listings of books, because that's honestly all I could find was short listings of books featuring women in STEM fictional characters, and a short listing of books about girls and women in STEM characters. One of the things that I have been absolutely blessed with on my podcast is that I've gotten to meet women who write books about women in STEM, both on the fiction side and children's books. And there are women and men out there too that are making, that are doing a lot to, try to move the needle on this. And it's absolutely great to see. And I just hope that we see more of this, so that, things can change, and that my daughters, grow up with this not being something that they have to think about, or that it's just a normal part of their world, that these are just careers that people can think about. So with that, I will open it up for questions, comments, discussion. I really like to have discussions. So if anyone wants to just chat, that would be great. If you have questions or anything, I can do my best to answer. Like I talked about, I am not an expert in this area. It's just something that I'm pretty passionate about, and would really love to hear from anyone.
Hi, Kathy. Hey, so I forgot to mention this at the beginning on the onset. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat section over on the right-hand side of your screen. Kathy, thank you so much for doing this. As it is, we have about 8 minutes left to get to the next class. I appreciate the actually pretty eye-opening for me, quite honestly. So I really appreciate the presentation. I don't see any questions at the moment. We could adjourn, take this time. We got about 8 minutes to get to the, here we go. Hang on. From Jessica, how do you think social media like TikTok is affecting the representation of women in STEM?
Gosh, I would really like to get one of my kids up here, actually, because I don't use TikTok. I have one of my kids that will send me TikToks. I'm not quite sure what to do with them other than watch them. But I know that there are, there's organizations and programming that really targets younger people that do use TikTok and do have, I think they're called channels. I could be too. But I think that's incredibly important, because at least so my range from 17 to 24. They're not watching that much TV. They're not necessarily watching movies. They're not necessarily reading books. I mean, I try to get them to read books, but how much impact do I have? But social media is so incredibly important. And there are some amazing, there's some amazing women that I have started following, some that I've had on my podcast, some that I'm trying to get on my podcast, that do some amazing things on social media. There's somebody called the Physics Girl. I follow her on Facebook because that's my generation, I guess. There is a woman called Stephanie who does videos of YouTube videos. She has a YouTube channel, YouTube videos of different experiments, and think of Bill Nye the Science Guy, kind of like that, but with her own YouTube channel. And they're amazing. So there definitely are people out there. I do think that you have to kind of search for it, and that's what I hope to also overcome. I'm going to just go back to another story. My son, when he was 13, wanted to build a computer, and I wanted to help him build this computer, because this is something I don't have a ton of things in common with my son, but this is something that I felt like I could help him with. And every YouTube channel that he went to and this is Googling how to learn how to build a computer, right? It was men, and that had these videos up. And so I think it's really important for women to be out there and to have a presence on social media. Again, we have to build that pipeline in order to, and a young pipeline, right? It's not me that is on YouTube or TikTok. It's building that pipeline and getting that information out to the social media platforms. But super, super great questions, really, really important. Yeah. And honestly, if you have any ideas on how to increase this, I would love to hear you. I would love to hear people's ideas too.
Yeah. Well, both my daughters are in their 30s, and they send me TikTok videos. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on any social media, but
Oh, good
They're
for you.
just funny. They're funny videos. I mean, I will say they put out some pretty funny stuff out there. So thank you for the question, Jessica. I don't think we have another question, so we've got 5 minutes to get to the next track. Thank you
Well,
again, Kathy, for your time. Any last parting words?
no, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and this is a great platform, and I am just really grateful for this opportunity to be here with you all. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you. All right, signing
All right.
off.
All right. Bye.